I think what we're seeing here is difficult to speculate because we don't know all of the facts. But what we do know is that Mr. Prigozhin is a war criminal. He should have been brought to justice in the International Criminal Court for his crimes and the crimes of the Wagner Group. Labour has called, 6 months ago, we called on the British government to proscribe the Wagner Group as a terrorist organisation. And I think our government should do that. For some reason, it isn't. And I think we have to look at this and say, look, Russia is a mafia state, and this is one part of a mafia clan striking back against another. That would appear to be what's happening. What we have to do is just redouble our support for the Ukrainian government, the Ukrainian people, give them the military and diplomatic and economic support that they need so that Putin's illegal war can be reversed and the Russian forces can be expelled from Ukraine. That should be our number one priority, and we should stay focused on that.
Do you think there's a bit of hypocrisy in the way that we deal, say, with Russia versus the way we deal with the United States? I mean, I spoke to Nick Gibb this morning for the government, asked him about if Donald Trump is convicted, would the Conservative government work with the convicted criminals President of the United States? And it kind of ties into the Prigozhin story. I mean, would Labour be able to work with a convicted criminal if he were to be leader of the free world? Some sort of hypocrisy in that, isn't there? He seemed to have broken the rule of law.
Well, there's a lot of hypotheticals in that because, first of all, Trump has to win the Republican nomination. We have to see what happens with all these indictments. I think he's got over 90 indictments. And then, of course, if he does end up being a candidate, whether he would be able to beat Joe Biden, who it looks like will be the Democrat candidate. So many hypotheticals in there. I'd rather not get drawn into that. What I would say, though, as you've asked a question about, which is a point of principle, which is we must respect and uphold the rule of law. Liberal democracy and the values that we cherish are founded on the principle of the rule of law, the principle that might is not right, that you can't just have a law of the jungle where the people with the biggest armies win. And that is something we must stand up for, both in the United Nations and in every other multilateral forum. And of course, we also need a British government that respects and upholds the rule of law in its words and in its actions. And I think that point of principle that you're asking about is a really important one, and it's one that we should never abandon.
OK, Stephen, I want to draw you into the quarterly immigration statistics, which are out today. I think they're about 9:30 this morning. We'll wait on those very shortly. But you are now calling for an overhaul of the skills system. I don't disagree with this. I think this sounds absolutely amazing. And the idea is to say to Britain's young people, there are more opportunities, there are jobs available, there are careers, practical careers available all around this country. And I mean, you'll talk about construction apprenticeships and all things that we'll applaud. That's all the good news. The bad news, my friend, is if I'm going to look at why there is a problem here, I'm thinking Tony Blair. And I'm thinking he was the one with the mantra, education, education, education. And that's why we have a shortage of dental nurses. You'll disagree with me, I know. You have a shortage of hairdressers, you have a shortage of motor mechanics, whatever. He made it so uncool to have a practical skill, to be a bricklayer, to be an electrician, to be a plasterer. I put it to you.
Well, what we are seeing is immigration at sky-high levels, and there's no doubt that employers across the country are being forced to reach for migrant labour because of the total failure to invest in apprenticeships, the total failure to get people, there's 2.5 million people on long-term sick, get those people back into the labour market, and to actually get our NHS working properly so that we don't have to constantly
We know all that. But the question is, Stephen, why are they out of that labour market? And it has to be a lot of the blame at the foot of Tony Blair.
I think you're setting up a false binary there, Eamon, with respect, because I don't think Tony would ever have said, we only want everyone to go to university. He set a 50% target, but of course, there's still a lot that needs to be done around the skills and vocational track. So I don't think Tony was ever saying it's an either or, it's a both and. And we want young people to go down the route that is right for them. Yeah. For some, the academic route is right. For others, the vocational route is right. But unfortunately, we've got an immigration system where they've got this points-based system now, which is just a completely blunt instrument where there's no connection really between the Migration Advisory Committee that decides on shortage occupation lists and other aspects of the system, and no connection with industrial strategy, and no connection with Skills England.
Well,
so
I think, Stephen, it's a laudable thing. I think it's a laudable thing what you're proposing.